Life is hard for the majority of Swazis who live below the poverty line on less than $1.25 a day, while their king enjoys an opulent life surrounded by his many wives.
He should spend less on his wives and give more to the poor.
The king rules with emergency powers. Opposition parties are banned. He controls everything, including the country's finances. Critics say what's left behind has been wasted by a king with extravagant taste. After 35 years of autocratic rule, tens of thousands of people are demanding change. Monarchies around the world have survived because they've changed. Despite the cracks appearing in his kingdom, it doesn't seem like King Mswati III is willing to take a back seat.
People have always revolted against the governments in Swaziland, and there have always been protests in Swaziland ever since they were released from the tombs of colonialism. I think it is because Swaziland is such a small country, about 18,000 square kilometers of surface land, and about only 1.1 million people. So many people don't consider the events that are happening there so seriously. A lot of countries, especially superpowers like America or England, they ignore Swaziland because Swaziland is such a small country. And the events that happen there maybe are of no concern to them. And because maybe Swaziland is not so rich in other minerals and it doesn't have oil, of course. So many of the things happening there, when people revolt against governments and demonstrate against the oppression, they are often ignored. And this has been happening for quite a long time now. The world has always ignored the situation in Swaziland.
His body was found on Thursday with broken ribs and cracked skull. His car was also allegedly shot at. Police say Nkomonye was involved in a car accident, but many say this is a police cover-up.
Buildings burned, civilians hospitalized, dozens dead, a monarchy potentially on its last breath. The government retaliated by shutting down the internet and imposed a strict dusk-to-dawn curfew on the public.
Mswati is the largest landowner in Africa. He owns about 60% of the land in Eswatini, or Swaziland. He is Africa's last absolute monarch, absolute in the sense that he has the power to choose the prime minister and other top traditional posts and other administrative posts. He is the sole, he is the one he appoints. He doesn't have to go through any elections. There will be personal appointments from him. He gets advice from his mother, who is known as Indlovukazi or Queen Mother. When he makes these appointments, he restored, when people were so hopeful when he ascended to power, he restored parliament, which had been dissolved by his father, an earlier sign that he might be democratic in his rule. But this all changed eventually when he went deeper and deeper into his rule. I think which answers to the mantra, or rather to this aphorism that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. He's now a totally corrupted man. And sometimes he refuses the advice of his mother in terms of appointments. I'm told at one time that the mother helped him, appointed someone who was a very good prime minister, who could answer to the needs of the people, who was very sensitive to the needs of the people, and he had him executed.
Swaziland's Mswati III. This a joint celebration of 40 years of independence and the King's 40th birthday. But behind this impressive display, Mswati's kingdom is crumbling under the weight of disease and poverty. Most of these young men will be lucky to live beyond 31 years of age, the average male life expectancy here according to government figures. And 40% of the people watching this spectacle are, statistically, HIV positive, the highest rate in the world.
Genuine respect for Swaziland's king, and this mixture of traditional and post-colonial pomp shows that off. But even in this last outpost of absolute monarchy, there are rumblings of discontent.
40 brand new BMWs were purchased especially for the celebrations to ferry dignitaries to the national stadium. Swaziland's trade unions boycotted the party. A sumptuous state banquet for the diplomatic community kicked off the celebrations. 8 of Mswati's 13 wives have been sent on an overseas shopping spree in preparation. They were wearing much of what they'd bought. This in a country where a third of the 1 million citizens rely on food aid. Annual per capita income here is $1,000, the lowest in southern Africa. And there will be parliamentary elections of sorts later this month, but political parties are banned, only individuals are elected. The king still appoints most of the upper house and approves the cabinet. Mswati III is absolutely in charge of this absolute monarchy.
And sometimes he refuses the advice of his mother in terms of appointments. I'm told at one time that the mother helped him, appointed someone who was a very good prime minister, who could answer to the needs of the people, who was very sensitive to the needs of the people, and he had him executed because he didn't like him and he didn't like his advice. He still lives a lavish lifestyle while his subjects live in abject poverty. Poverty is everywhere in Swaziland, and only a few people enjoy wealth and riches, including his own personal family.
Now, each Rolls Royce is worth about 10 million rand, and this all apparently took place during student protests that have led to the closure of tertiary institutions in Eswatini. Now, the protests are due to a failure by government to pay student expenses for the past 2 months, and public servants, for their part, have also taken to the streets demanding better salaries.
Our people are extremely angered and upset by the recent acquisition of these luxury vehicles. But also for us, we are quite excited as a movement because we have been vindicated for what we have been saying for almost 4 decades now, that the monarchy in Swaziland is extremely parasitic and its lavish lifestyle is financed through the raiding of the public purse. But I think it would be important, Sakina, to take a step back in contextualizing exactly what is happening in Swaziland. Because you would remember that after 2011, where Swaziland experienced deep financial crisis, all of us were asked to tighten our belts and accept that the country is in a financial crisis and everyone else must come to the party. You remember the country even approached South Africa for a 2.5 billion bailout, of which we successfully lobbied South Africa that even if it were to give that bailout, it can't give it unconditionally, because what has been happening is that all the monies that come from SACCO receipts, instead of being directed into developmental issues of the country, that directed into financing the lavish lifestyle of the king. So what happened then is that the king was able to get a bit of finances from Taiwan and some of the Arab states. What has subsequently happened is that there were quite a lot of reforms that took place. There were reforms of the revenue agencies. There were reforms where government had to cut some of the excesses that it was doing. But then what has happened over the time is that as the finances improved, we have seen the king back raiding the public purse. But even before the finances could improve, Swaziland went on a huge borrowing spree and lied to say this money is being borrowed to finance infrastructural development. But what we realized was that that money was being raised so that it can continue financing Mswati's lavish lifestyle. So all infrastructural projects that happened in Swaziland between 2011 and now have had huge cost overruns. You talk about the building of the Skupe Airport, you talk about the building of the freeways, you talk about the current construction of the International Convention Center and the 5-star hotel, that when it started it was estimated to cost the fiscals 2.2 billion, who are currently approaching 6 billion. And it is because precisely is using this so-called capital project finance to raid them so that it can get money over and above what is already looting from the national fiscus. And that explains why even the Minister of Finance couldn't give an explanation to Parliament when he was asked about this frequent acquisition and said you will need time to go and research, because he didn't know what was happening. So that is the state of affairs in Swaziland. And the message is clear. Everyone is saying now the time has come that this monarchy must go. So people are clear that...
But go where? As we say, Eswatini is an absolute monarchy. So what do you propose be done with the monarchy?
Look, our proposal is very clear, is that let power in Swaziland shift to the people. We need to make sure that the power rests with the people as opposed to having power rest with one individual, the monarch. And everyone is rallying behind that call because they've seen that the monarchy in Swaziland is sustained at the expenses of the nation. Now, what we need to appreciate it is that it is not necessarily the mere existence of the institution of the monarchy that is a problem. What becomes a problem is when that institution becomes parasitic and lives a lavish lifestyle at the expense of the nation. Now we talk about health crisis, we have rightly mentioned education crisis, we have rightly mentioned the issue that there has been no raises of wages for public sector workers.
In Swaziland, and only a few people enjoy wealth and riches, including his own personal family. He is a very rich person, he has a lot of money, but his people live in real poverty. He now has about 2 jets. The one he has bought recently. The latest, he bought it for about 15 million and modified it for about 30 million. Which means the money that he used for modifying, or rather for making improvements to this jet, was more than double what he used to buy it. What else can be a sign or an indication that this person is very careless in the use of money, in the use of state money, which he takes from state coffers? He's very careless and doesn't care how much he's using, which means he doesn't look around to see the poverty that is prevailing among his own people. He only cares about himself.
We have nothing to hide. We had to then get the army.
Usiyami mfanami sethuka kakhulu locingo lafika nake ensathakusa ushaya lonina lomfana awengela ngefa sitsabuka kakhulu ngakhala ungathi Wathi baba lokulini thole bevayenda lokubabula kakusho angikwadi yena ngokuthi hey bahamba la idarati bekangaya hambi la idala yena wasuke ekhaya nje wathi usala angathi nombeka lanzani kanti sokupita ukolukufa amidubula ke ndivayinza makusunele lokukini wathi hoyi sabufa ke nathi ngala ngesiphofaneni kanala kithi dawufika nje kujabu nakhona bafa kwababuhlungu kakhulu mntwana.
Ekuseni ngamhla ka-29 maka wangithuma etown. I had to buy my portion. Bona lamanye bangani bami khona lapho ngadecide ukuthi hayi no angingene ngihlale lapha eGV. So manje masiphuma ngawuphuma nje la GV sakhanza inqumbe bami lapho ke sekushisa amathayi lapho lamgwaqweni sekunemsimbo ke ngathi sisaphumile siyabukela lapha. At the meantime lapho kusendeka lokho abantu basabanga blonglong shows manje kwafika amaphoyisa wavakala nje iqhumane wonke umuntu uyabaleka usabona ukuthi ubhekaphi lapho mina ngicount ngagijima nje 10 seconds ngabe ngiwaphasa ngingade lokhu kwenzakalana ngemva ngalomunye umuntu nje sangitshela ukuthi bakudubile nakhona ngimati nalomunye because nguye lo wangithatha wangithwala wafika ngifaka emotweni wangimekisa esibhedlela.
80% of Swazi people live on less than $1.2 a day, and he doesn't see all that. He bought also in 2018. He bought about 19 Rolls-Royce cars, very expensive cars, and one of which was very, very expensive. They say he bought them all for something like $4.5 million US. For himself, for his mother, and for his wives. Very expensive cars. Without even caring about how his people live. He's using all this money on himself and on his wife, on his family. And yet the rest of his people are living in sheer, deplorable poverty. This is a blind king. King who doesn't deserve to be a king at all because he doesn't care about his subjects. He has been widely criticized, especially on the buying of this Rolls-Royce. People have widely criticized him for that. But now I think he has developed a thick skin towards criticism because it looks like he doesn't even care. Because all he cares to say after people criticized him on the buying these things, he said, no one, we abolished, or rather, he forbid anyone from photographing his cars, his fleet of cars, because there are so many of them. Protests have always existed against the king's lavish lifestyle. This lavish lifestyle have always attracted a lot of protests from his people. In August 2008, people marched through the capital protesting the extravagant spending of his 9 wives. He sent his 9 wives to go abroad and with a lot of money to go and buy whatever they want in preparation for his birthday and the celebration for his independence of his country. And they used a lot of money, quite lavishly and extravagant. People noticed it, and women had to march through the capital, Mbabane, protesting this. It has always been plagued by years of corruption, mindless overspending, and fiscal indiscipline within the king, with the king resorting to borrowing every time he wipes out state coffers. The country has always been teetering on the brink of economic collapse. I'm told in 2013 or 2011, they had to be rescued by South Africa. The country did not have any money at all, so that they had to ask for some kind of money from South Africa, and they only survived because South Africa helped them with some money. The king has always used ruthless tactics to quell dissent with a lot of success every time there was an uprising. He is always ruthless on his subjects. Everyone tried to say something against him. He's back with the cruelty, the worst cruelty that you can ever imagine. And like that.
I am trying to understand why people would shoot to kill young men who are unarmed.
We were afraid all the time.
The small kingdom of Eswatini in southern Africa, previously known as Swaziland, has recently been rocked by a series of protests that turned violent. It followed a ban on the delivery of citizens' petitions, which called for the king's powers to be diluted. King Mswati III is Africa's last remaining absolute monarch and has ruled the country for over 30 years. His opponents say he enjoys a lavish lifestyle, while the majority of his people live in poverty. We haven't been able to enter the country. So far, our application for accreditation has been ignored. But the footage that's emerged despite the internet shutdown tells a story of intimidation and excessive use of force by the police and the military. Anger has been boiling over since June, when protesters took to the streets demanding reforms, authorities cracked down hard, often using live ammunition. Officially, 27 people were killed. Some say that number is higher.
This is how we like to remember him. Always so joyful and smiling. They say there were cops there and there were shots fired. The postmortem confirmed that it was a gun shot through the lungs, into the lungs, through his heart. I'm mad because I am trying to understand why people would shoot to kill young men who are unarmed. For what reason?
The BBC has been speaking to people across Eswatini with similar harrowing stories to tell of excessive violence by security forces.
Ngive khula tukwehlahla temakotapeni tihleli nje standini ngihleli tukwesitini ngive ingena nje inhlavla ngena nje la ngemuva ngive kushisa lesisu.
And this boy is just 14. He was also shot in the back. His mother says he may never walk again.
Asamdubulile angabe asamnaka noma samdubulile amethuka wabaleka ke umfana. Asabalekile umfana watholwa labamthola endleleni asawile akhala ngemanti bamnathisa ke manti waqhamuka ke nalomunye babeke lo ngumfundisi wamthatha wayomfaka esibhedlela.
It is a combination of people protecting themselves. It is a combination of our security forces responding in like manner to quell and bring security to Eswatini. It is not ordinary people being targeted by the police as it has been depicted.
The government clampdown has also extended to journalists. Some of them were tortured. Hey guys, how are you doing now?
How are you?
Fine, fine. Are you recovered?
Yeah, we're trying.
We're getting there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Physically, but mentally, maybe not. I got some snaps using my cell phone. Magnificent got some pictures using his camera. But then a soldier jumped out of nowhere, and ordered us to come over, And then he wanted to know, why are you taking pictures here? Don't you know that it's illegal to be just taking pictures of these? But we told them that we were journalists, and they didn't seem to care.
I mean, they were strangling me, like holding me by my throat and then pulling me down. And then others were punching me, of course, in my ribs. And then they closed my face. And then I saw another plastic coming. So now you can't breathe, you can't talk, you can't say anything. And then it keeps telling you that they want you to talk.
Did you think you were going to die?
For me, I must be honest, I had no hope that we're going to make it out alive. It was very bad.
Throughout the events of the last few weeks, the king has remained silent. The current calm on the streets hides the deep frustration amongst the people and anger at how they have been treated.
Mina ngingabavumela nyana laba labateleka uthi uma kuthiwa kuteleke nami sengingateleka ngendlela labangitshela ngayo ukuthi kwenteka ngayo.
Vele siyadikhalela kakhulu nganakulo kwenteka kunalive ngokuthi nangemambala inkosi ayise isibonelele kunalo lokusolo sibhekane nako ba asisathambi umuntu mase sekujike nje amaphoyisa sekungiwo lasa abulala abantu asati ke ukuthi nyaloke sitawubaleka sibhekephi.
The cruelty, the worst cruelty that you can ever imagine, and he just doesn't care because he doesn't want people to criticize him, no matter what he does. People, because they are people, they always criticize. So he's always very criticized by his people, and as an answer to that, instead of listening to their criticism, he comes back with an iron fist, ruthlessly crushing any revolt, ruthlessly crushing any demonstrations, to make sure that nobody says anything against whatever he does, with state money. It's state money, it's not even his money because he doesn't have any money. The money belongs to the state and belongs to the people. But because he thinks the people belong to him, and he thinks the country belongs to him, he thinks everything in Swaziland belongs to him. So he thinks he can do whatever he wants with anything that exists in Swaziland. And that is where the problem is, that he thinks he owns everything and everyone in Swaziland. He resorts to torture and extreme force to silence critics, and this regime has been criticized of human rights violations. He has always resorted to killing those who dare question his rule as a way of silencing them. He has always been accused of unwarranted and unilateral seizure of one's property and land without remorse. He can, if he sees a piece of land that he admires, that he likes, he can just ask the people who have settled on that piece of land to move. Then he takes ownership of that piece of land without even compensating the people who are living on that, without making sure that they are properly resettled. He just takes the piece of land and it becomes his because that's what he wants. What a selfish leader, what a blindly cruel and selfish leader. This level of cruelty, this level of brutal insensitivity, it does not have to belong to somebody who is a leader of a country, somebody who is referred to as a king. A king has to have a heart for his people, and certainly Mswati III doesn't have a heart for anyone, let alone the heart for his own people. He just changed in 2018. He changed the name of his country without consultation to show his power over a country he owns. He just wakes up on his birthday and says this country is no longer going to be called Swaziland, it's now called Eswatini. Some people say he was justified because Eswatini is the original name of Swaziland, and Swaziland is only a colonial name that was given to the country by its colonizers or by colonial powers. But he needed to have done some consultations, maybe have a referendum to ask people whether they, and because this eventually costed the country some money. Change of a name cost attracts a lot of cost, but he didn't care about the cost. But that's what he wanted, that now this country needed to be called Eswatini, and he changed it and nobody ever questioned him about it. That's how unilateral and how arbitrary he is. That's the kind of man that he surely is, and you can see it in the change of name of Swaziland. Now all hell is broken loose, and it appears like there's no going back. Eswatini is literally on fire, with no sign of the fires getting extinguished. It's real on fire. Eswatini is on fire. Eswatini is on fire. It's on fire every time the fires are burning. Literally burning, because the people are petrol bombing schools, police stations, whatever, shops and everything. All kind of infrastructure and installations are getting burned by people whose anger cannot be held back. They are so angry, they don't care about anything. After all, they have nothing to lose because they have nothing. The country belongs to the king, so what do they have to lose? They don't care about their lives anymore. People are losing limbs, people are losing their lives, people are losing their hands, people are being burned almost on a daily basis. The number, some people are estimating that now as I do this video, as I'm shooting this video today on the 18th of October, they say the number is over 100 people who have been killed by King Mswati because of demonstrations. The problem that is compounding the hatred of the king is that some palace secrets are being exposed, and more people are beginning to totally dislike the monarchy, because the skeletons which were in the wardrobe, hidden so carefully in the wardrobes, which were protected jealously by the king, now are being let loose because many people are getting to dislike him. Even those who are close to him are the ones who are really getting the skeleton out of the wardrobe, making sure that the secrets that is so sacred, religiously guided, are out, and people are beginning to hate him, because some people are saying there are boys who are always there, small kids who are there to taste his food, and if his food is poisonous, he would know from the death of a kid that this food was poisonous. And there is a boy who is always by his side, whom they say is always by his side, whom they say is his sole responsibility or his task there is to hold a bowel. When the king is ejaculating into that bowel, he ejaculates, and then the sperms get to be mixed by the sperms are mixed with the food that people eat when they come and gather for the ritual umhlanga. That's what he does. He's a ritual leader, a cultic leader who believes in the strength of this juju that he uses. And he believes that his power comes from actions like that. He's quite big. He might not be very old, but he's quite backward indeed. So, as the fires are raging in Eswatini there, as people are revolting and protesting and people are getting killed, but it looks like this is their final push. I think I also advise them not to relent.
Anger and frustration in Eswatini. Crowds built barricades and burned tyres despite an overnight curfew and what the opposition's calling a tipping point for the nation. Demonstrations like this are rare in the small landlocked country formerly known as Swaziland. But dissent has been simmering for years, much of it focused on King Mswati, Africa's last absolute monarch and one of the few remaining in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Majesty the King of Swaziland has arrived.
He was crowned in 1986, aged just 18, and has unfettered political power. He has 15 wives and has been criticised for his lavish spending, while most in Eswatini live in poverty.
We are the youth of Swaziland, and we are so much depressed by the government. Whichever time I say, our government is not being fair. You get me? Our government is not being fair. It's just a one-man's land.
The protesters say they want democracy. Political parties are banned, and even though people are allowed to vote for members of parliament, the opposition says they're not elections, more selections of people signed off by the king.
Us as young people of the land, we don't want the king to be part of the government, and if you want to be part of the government, he must first be a citizen like the rest of us and go to work like every one of us.
Some shops in its two biggest cities have been looted and others set on fire. The military's been out to enforce a curfew, which the government says is to ensure the safety and security of residents. But the opposition says some protesters have been killed and many others wounded. The acting Prime Minister says he's open to hearing the people's complaints, but demonstrating isn't the way to do it. For decades, King Mswati's been portrayed as a deeply popular monarch. Now the government's been forced to deny reports he's fled the country. His kingdom appears to be in crisis.
They must keep on going, they must keep on pushing. Otherwise, if they fail to push him out now, there might never be another chance like this again. Because they've gone so far and a lot of them have been killed so far and a lot of them have been maimed. This is not the time for them to stop. They must keep on keeping on. They must fight him until he's disposed, until he runs away from his own country to seek asylum outside Swaziland. Maybe that is what he's going to use the jet for, because his latest jet, the jet that he bought recently, they said he bought it for, was it 15 million United States dollars, and it can carry about, it has a carrying capacity of about 277 people. I think the wives and the kids and maybe those close to him are less than that number. They are less than 277, so that he can carry his people whenever that is being disposed, when he's being overthrown, when he's no longer wanted in Swaziland, when he's no longer sitting on that throne. He can just carry everything that is precious to him, put it in his jet and flies away, maybe to South Africa or to Botswana or to Zimbabwe or whichever country where he's going to hide and seek asylum and stay as a fugitive. But I think it is very embarrassing for a king who has been having absolute power, who has been a monarchy, who has had absolute power, for him to run away in such in a manner that really doesn't befit a king. He should have been prepared to talk to these people so that maybe they were going to find a way of giving them their power to elect their people who represented them and to still remain the king himself. But he doesn't want that. And it seems that is the problem. Eventually he might have to abdicate and run away with his whole family. When he's dethroned, he will like to run away. And I think that is very, very imminent. That is very inevitable. That might happen sooner than later, and because all the signs are there. Although himself, he thinks that as usual, people get tired. When they get tired, he will talk to them and give them false promises, and then everything will back to normal. It looks like nothing is going to get back to normal right now, because their people's fighting spirit is, energized. They really want to fight up to the end. They need to see a change in their lives, because they have been suffering for quite a long time and there have been no change. And they can't wait for the international community, because it looks like countries like America, which usually would intervene in a situation where there are human rights abuses, they are just quiet, because Eswatini is such a very small figment of what they will be interested in. They are not interested in Eswatini's affairs or in defending it or in getting their name tarnished because of for a small country like that. So they have been quiet. At one time, the ambassador said something, and then it fizzled out to nothing. It amounted to nothing. All we are getting from him now is silence. He's not saying anything. Even the neighboring South Africa, they are not saying anything. Ramaphosa there is just quiet. The SADC region, the SADC community, they are also quiet. So they have to do it, they are on their own right now. They have to do it by themselves. And I think if they do it by themselves like they are trying to do, they will win in the end. Because no one will stop a storm like that once it gets, it hits. You can't stop a storm that is so natural. That was bound to come for quite a long time. This fight has been on for a long time, and it's now just continuing. Maybe it's reaching its peak now, because everything now is very, very different. And these people, I really have got a different spirit now. It's different, and they don't want to be. It's not going to be quenched by anything except a change in government and a change in power, the reins of power. Thank you so much. My channel is We Africa. We Africa. You must subscribe to the channel, please, and comment and share this video.
There are things that home cannot teach you, and then there are things that you get when you're around these girls.
Nobody tells us that you must do this thing. We do this in ourselves, and we've been started in 2004.
I can always go around motivating young maidens that it's possible, not that it's something that is not doable. It's doable.